back again with another Essentials video. This time we're looking at Synthpop. If you haven't been keeping up to date with all of the other videos in this series so far, I highly recommend you going into the playlist where you can watch, I think, about 8-9-ish videos of Essentials looking at all kinds of different styles of music and all different eras of music. Hopefully you've been enjoying this series as much as I've been making it, and if you would like your own request for what I would do next in this series, you can actually be on my Patreon and get your own requests in for what I do next, as well as other series that you can be a part of too. So if you're very interested in that, please click the link. That would be amazing to see more people subscribe to me over on there. You can join the Discord server too. There's lots of great little perks, so if you have something you're itching to see me do, please click the Patreon link. Synthpop is something that has been around and can kind of be traced back all the way up until the 70s, even though a lot of people might associate the sound and a lot of the modern ideas to the 80s. But if you're going further back than that, you're looking at artists such as like Kraftwerk in the 70s that really pioneered this style of music and really pioneered where we ended up going with a lot of pop music too. Synth pop is a way to describe a variation of pop music, but ultimately you're going to get a lot of synths in lots of different types of pop music. You can look at modern artists and think of like a Carly Rae Jepsen, for example, and totally describe her as synth pop. But for this particular video, I just wanted to kind of extract a specific feeling, a specific vibe that you get from synth pop with my picks. It might be sometimes a bit colder, minimal, and maybe detached in how it sounds, but of course it still is really accessible and catchy and really super melodic as well. So we're certainly going to be traveling through different decades, different eras with my picks here for sure, but these are my 5 essential picks. These are personal ones for me that I wanted to include. Of course, you may be thinking, why have you not included this? Why have you not included that? I like to do things a little bit different around here. I like to throw in my own picks that I think are maybe not as talked about or not as immediately thought of, but nevertheless should be thought of and should be talked about way more than they are. And we're going to get in some classics there too. So hopefully you enjoyed this video and let's get it going. Starting with, you know, pretty much an undisputed classic here though, Power, Corruption and Lies by New Order, which is the 1983 album from the band, who prior to this point were obviously, you know, known for what they were doing as Joy Division, but transitioning into this band, which is not, you know, a novel thing to say, is still pretty remarkable how they totally shifted the way they were doing things and just kind of embraced modern music at that time and just started to push ideas forward to create some really exciting synth pop music. I mean, of course, Blue Monday is one of the most iconic songs ever from, you know, the UK and in pop music. It's a fantastic track. You don't see that on this album though, but they absolutely paved the way for this sound to come, and it would be pretty hard not to at least mention them in a video like this, considering how influential they were and how good this album is too. Like I was saying before, a bit more colder, a bit more minimal, a bit more sparse actually in how it sounds, but nevertheless it still is really catchy in places. I really like the guitar tones on this album. I think there's some really nice work laid down there. You've got tracks like The Village, Age of Consent, 586, really good tracks. For me, the only thing is that not every track needs to go on as long as it does. In terms of this particular list, I actually think this might be my least favourite one of the whole bunch, even though what it represents might be the most important album of the whole bunch as well. Sometimes being the most important doesn't necessarily mean the best, but it still is a very good album. It doesn't really earn its title. It's not a particularly edgy sounding album or a particularly very I guess bold album in what it's presenting lyrically, but you would expect it to be, you know, this kind of outspoken political piece of music, considering it's called Power, Corruption and Lies. But so aside from that mismatch with its title, cover and how the music sounds, I would say it certainly is an essential pick here. Just yeah, hard to really deny it, to be honest with you. Going in more of a quirkier direction now though, you've got Fever Ray's really baffling and quirky and strange vocals being laid over these fantastic shimmering and shiny and in your face synth tracks that clash and smash and splash all over the place. This is definitely one of the most obvious albums that comes to mind immediately whenever I think of synth pop. I mean, The Knife were doing some really cool stuff in 2006 with this one. They even went on to make the album in 2013, which was way more ambitious and took their sound even further, to be honest, actually. But yeah, Fever Ray is hard to ignore when you think of this style. Of course, the Björk influence definitely comes through, but definitely feel as though what they were doing on this album was just so mind-boggling in places. Just the way it kind of sounds like frigid and fragile and kind of cold. It's such a cool sounding album. It's got a great sound design, and for me has to be on this list. Susanne Sundfor with 10 love songs, and by God, are they excellent 10 love songs on this album here. Super underrated still to this day. You do see a bit more love for Susanne now, actually, considering she has dropped a few releases over the past couple of years that have carried a bit more weight to them than what she was doing back when this album came out. And I wrote this off when I first heard it too. I never really found there to be much interesting on this album when I first heard it, but the more I listened, the more I just really found her voice captivating. She might be the best vocalist on this whole list, to be honest with you. Just an absolute powerful, just stunning vocal that just echoes and lives on and really reaches inside of you. And it might not be actually her best vocal performing album, but in terms of pop and just really bright synths and just really fantastic stunning melodies, this is absolutely a synth pop classic to me at this point. This is so bloody good. It might not be old enough yet to be called that, but my God, Kamikaze, Slowly, Fade Away, just excellent pop tunes. An excellent album, one of the best of the 2010s for sure, and yeah, for me has to be on this list. Next, we're going back to the 80s for an absolute undisputed classic. One of my favourite albums of all time, this actually. When we're looking at 10 out of 10 albums in the Ryan world, in the not real music world, you gotta be talking about this one, because this for me is just stellar, man. Everything about this album just feels so huge, anthemic. Every track just feels like you've got, you know, vocals that are everlasting, and you know, the last moments of your life you're about to witness, and you need to just yelp out everything you're feeling in that moment just to get it out to the world before the world comes crashing down over you. It is just one of those albums for me. The vocals on this album feel huge, feel just so emotive. The songs are ridiculously well put together as well. Head over heels. What can I even say about Everybody Wants to Rule the World, which is like one of the most iconic pop songs of all time. You've got tracks like Broken as well. Shout, really strong track. Like, yeah, from start to end, this album is just really fantastic. And the beautiful thing about it is how timeless it is to this day as well. Like, so timeless. You know, they made music in the 80s, and it's like they knew what the future was going to sound like, and they knew how to make something that was going to just stand the test of time. This is really aged remarkably well. And yeah, when you're looking at some other albums from this era and in this synth style, you might kind of go, slightly dated. This one sounds like it's from the 80s. Not an attack on the album, but, you know, sounds like it's from the 80s. This album doesn't, and it kind of defies the synth pop logic from the 80s, really, where it just sounds like it could have come out a few weeks ago. It's incredible piece of work here for me, and yeah, some of the best pop music of all time. And considering what they were doing, they just achieved something really impressive for me. I can't stress enough how fantastic this is. And finally, wrapping things up, you know, no attack on them being last here, but it is the most recent album on this entire list, and possibly one you wouldn't necessarily think of immediately, but I wanted to include it. I wanted to include Let's Eat Grandma's Two Ribbons. I think for a modern act, they are doing some really, really beautiful synth work here, and I think still it surpassed their previous album, I'm All Ears, which is really good. It's a really good album, but I think this one here just managed to craft such beauty in what it was going for, you know, like the way these synths just feel so clean, the way the tracks feel like the singer is just pouring out her love for that person in such a stunning way. I just find this album to be really, really touching. I find it to be really, really romantic. I find it to be really, really heartfelt as well. It's just such a lovely album. And yeah, the synths on this, in terms of modern acts, I mean, there are some really good other acts as well in the modern day that are doing synth pop type stuff. Churches is a good example, and you could include them on this list if you wanted. But yeah, that emotion behind what they're doing with Let's See Grandma here just kind of elevates it to another level for me. And yeah, just makes for a really, really stunning piece of work. Just felt that it was a really good one to bring up, because when you're looking at what's going to be, you know, standing the test of time, there is a really strong chance that this album will do that because of how well produced it is. And they're so young as well, by the way. They're still so young. So I'm super impressed with this. I think it's a really great album. It's not like in the all-time conversation because it is so recent, but I think as a starting piece, as like a starter pack for you for synth pop albums, I would like to hand you over this one. I think it shows a nice, new, fresh and modern sound for the genre in a really, really well done way. And that is it from me. Just to remind you, this is not the 5 best synth pop albums of all time. This is not the 5, you know, most essential ever albums, because if that were true, I probably would have mentioned Depeche Mode, I would have mentioned Kraftwerk a bit more, and these are totally worth your time as well. But I just wanted to put my own spin on this. I want to give you 5 that I think are excellent, maybe some here that don't get talked about as much as others, maybe some that you haven't considered yourself, and that's what we like to do on this channel. So please make sure you are subscribing and checking out my Patreon, as I've already mentioned. Please tell me your picks in the comments, what you think I missed off, if you think I missed obvious ones, but keep in mind what I'm trying to do here. Tell me what I should do next in this series. Have a good day and goodbye.